Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. So good to have you with us tonight. I am thankful that you have made the time to come in and to connect with us. I know that you are on Facebook and we have you on YouTube with us tonight. It's some crazy weather going on here in Gauteng, but I know that the weather is shared down in KZN, and that's exactly where my guest is from tonight. This is Myron Israel that's joining me live and in session. So we're going to be talking tonight on the subject of leaders and teams. I know we spoke about this a little bit last week, and we're just picking up on the subject again. And we're going to get some valuable insights and thoughts from Myron tonight. So, Myron, you can go ahead and unmute and just greet all of the folks that are online. I know that there are some followers of yours that are already here. I see Darren and obviously Narissa's here. I'm guessing you know a Shabana Naidu. Let me give a shout out to Angelique. Thank you once again for connecting, Angelique. I know that you're with us every week. Melissa, good to have you connected tonight. So that's just some of the people that are with us, Myron. You can go ahead and give them a shout out before we go into our conversation.
Well, yeah, good evening, everybody. And I want to thank you, Renal, for inviting me onto this platform tonight. I'm honored to be sharing this with you. And yeah, to all those that are listening, I hope that you're going to pick up some valuable stuff tonight. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That is about as formal as I hear Myron speak, because aside from this platform, we are good friends, we are brothers, we go back a long way. And I know that he has fulfilled some pretty awesome leadership roles in his life's journey. So he's going to be talking to us about that. But Myron, before we go into that conversation, we need to set you up and we need to just put you in the hot seat tonight. I have a few questions in front of me.
Okay.
And these questions are for you to answer, and these questions about you. So everybody knows your name is Myron Israel. There are various people that are connected tonight that know you in your different roles and capacities. We're putting all of that out of the window, and what we want to know is the real Myron tonight. So usually I would have more than one guest, so I actually have a list of 12 questions. Don't stress, you're not going to be asked all 12. You get to select from the list of 12. So I'll give you an option of 2 questions that you can select. So any number from the numbers 1 through to 12, you can select. Good evening to you, Dorothy. Thank you for connecting tonight. And we got your shout out online to say good evening. Myron, back to you. From numbers 1 through to 12, which number would you select tonight?
Number 3.
Number 3. Oh, this question. This question, I don't know if you're going to like very much, but the question says, are you a reader? And what is either your favorite or most recent read?
I am a reader, but my favorite read is definitely the Bible, and I hate to spoil anybody's anticipation of some other book, but that is my favorite read.
I
Yeah.
figured that was going to be our answer for tonight. I don't think any disappointments on there. It does let our people in on exactly the mind and the individual that we're talking to tonight. Second question, pick from numbers 1 through to 12, except number 3.
Number 2.
Question number 2. Okay, tell us what has been the most daring or adventurous thing you have done.
Wow. Okay. So
Just remember you're on a social platform, yeah, right?
this is it. This is it. I've got to be careful. I would have to say ziplining not
Okay.
too long ago, but the reason why it was daring was I had my children with me and my wife, and so we all went ziplining. And this was a few years ago, so Trinity was much younger then. I think she was
Yeah.
about 4 years old, and so and Tristan was about 7, and so there were moments when I had to leave them on their own with the crew that was busy attending to them, and so that's why I
Yeah.
think that was the most daring thing I've ever done. It wasn't the zip lining itself, but it was more leaving my children alone.
Okay. Sound a
That's
little
right.
bit like a control freak there, but I guess maybe more like a protective father. We'll go more on the positive side.
We'll stick with protective father, right?
Let me just give Shout out Kashmir. Thank you for coming in tonight. And to Greshi that's connected online. I see she enjoyed your little tale. Shlumi, good to have you. Great to have you connected tonight. And please feel free, ladies and gentlemen that are online, feel free to share this broadcast to your pages. Also, in our conversation tonight, as we talk about leaders and teams, you're welcome to drop us questions if you have any. And we're going to have our mastermind here. So I'll just take the pressure away from me and throw it over at Myron. Now, Myron and I may have a conversation about it. We may do a little bit of research and come back to you on it. But whatever the case is, drop us a question. If you have questions on being a leader, working within a team or leading a team, any questions that you have on that, and we'll try and get through to that tonight and give you a response as best we can. Now, coming to the main subject matter tonight, Myron, you have worked in both the corporate sector. You currently lead a church. Um, so let us know, what are the biggest differences that you've experienced in terms of leading a team of people in corporate sector within church? Like, is it different? And what would those differences be if it is? Before you answer,
Look,
let me give a wave back to, I have a Nalendran Naidu that's giving us a wave. I can't wave right here on Facebook, so I'm just waving physically. Thanks for connecting tonight. Go ahead, Myron.
yeah, so look, there are definitely differences. You wouldn't expect there to be differences, but there are. I think in terms of the one that I would look at most is how we manage conflict. Conflict management in a church environment versus conflict management in the work environment, and especially when you're dealing with people and with teams. There is always going to be the presence of conflict, right? So, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize when you step into any leadership, whether in church or in corporate. There isn't going to be the absence of conflict. There is always going to be the presence of conflict. And so, as a leader, you sometimes expect conflict in a church environment to be easier. But from experience, and I hope that no one's going to get offended with what I'm going to say, but I found that conflict in church is a little bit more difficult to manage. And I think the reason for that is, to put it mildly or bluntly, is the one you have to pay them to be at work. The other, they attend church just because they like to. And if they stop liking coming to church, then they just stop. And so when you're managing conflict in the work environment, you'll find that you can say to somebody in the work setting, listen, I think you need to take a break for a while. You're out of line, or, go rethink what you're saying. And the next day they come back to work and they're ready to crack. You do that in a church environment, and you've got a lot of offenses to deal with. So I think the presence of a salary does assist with conflict in the workplace. I have to be honest. But having said that, the right type of people will help you. And again, it goes down to the team that you select. But sorry, Ren, carry on.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's going to go back to the teams, and I've often heard it said that maybe it's easier because of the earning in the corporate sector versus within the church. I wonder though, would you say it's easier for people to bring emotion to the table when it comes to conflict in a church environment versus a work environment? Do we have to deal with more emotion within the church space, you think? Is it easier for an employee, for instance, to keep emotion out of it? Or would that not really play a role?
Look, I think emotion is always going to be present, right? So again, there's always going to be the presence of emotion. But I found that emotion in a work setting is controlled better. And again, in the church, and maybe because people are expecting a certain type of attitude, or when it comes to leading, or maybe they're expecting because they've heard about love and they know love well, and we talk about love, they think that there's going to be the absence of love. So when it comes to us talking to them about something, so sometimes people misunderstand that when we are saying, listen, take a break, they want to know where's the love, you know.
Mm.
But discipline is a part of love. And the thing about that is people accept it in the workplace, but in the church, the first thing they ask is, where's the love? When we say, so let's say you're striving for excellence in the church environment, right? As an example. And, and you're striving for excellence in the corporate environment. In the corporate setting, you can have a meeting after the fact, which normally happens after each event in a corporate
Mm-hmm.
setting, and you will go through the things that worked well, the things that didn't work well, and everybody talks about what they learned. So, you know, we want to learn how to do it better. You
Mm-hmm.
do that in a church environment, and people get offended because it's a free will offering. And that
Mm.
word free will offering can trip a lot of ministries up. So, yeah, that's what I found. You know, emotion normally jumps into play because people are expecting people to always pat them on their back in church, always to say you did an excellent job here. You know, and I'm not saying that that isn't the case, but there's always the opportunity to improve, and that's where a lot of Christians in churches find it difficult, and that's the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And you pick up on love, and I guess
Mm.
love can be seen as a very soft thing. And you're right. Maybe we talk about it more in a church world than we do in a corporate space, right? I mean, you're not going to walk into a management meeting and hear somebody talking about love, not a leader. But the reality is that love is, I'm going to say, love is something that every leader should have for the team that's around him. And you again, we don't talk about it in the corporate space because it might seem too soft. But if you don't have love and everything that comes with it, then it actually can add to it being more difficult for you to deal with the team around you, right? But for the leader, though, would you say in that emotional space then that one of the big requirements for leaders, and if they're going to work with teams, is that they are able to understand emotions and manage the emotions of their people? And if you're working in a team, it may be even a little bit more complex because each person is going to have sort of a different trend of emotion or a different scale of emotion, if you will. That might be their natural default that they go to, in any conflict situation, especially.
No, definitely. And you know, you're quite right. A leader has to operate out of love. Um, but again, like you rightly said, nobody would go and sit in front of their director, their MD, and say, "I don't feel you love me." But in a church environment, when a leader is taking a certain stance on something that he believes or she believes should have been done in a different way, the first thing that the person will sit before them and say is, "I don't feel you love me." And you know, it causes a certain types of reactions from people. But there must be the presence of love. There's no doubt about it. But
Sure.
a lot of people don't understand the full extent of God's love. And I think
Hmm.
if we start to understand the full extent of God's love, you will understand that within God's love, there is a push towards excellence. There is a, you know, there is discipline. The
Hmm.
disciples were not called disciples for nothing. They were called disciples because they were disciplined in their following of Christ. And so, you know, yeah, it becomes more difficult though in a church. You know, I think when I talk to a lot of our business leaders in some of the platforms that I deal with people on, um, they don't have anybody coming and saying, yeah, you know, you don't love me. Because when they start to get challenged like that, they might get fired. But in the
Mm.
church environment, it's different. And so we understand those needs. And I think managing the emotions of people is another difficult thing. And I think in both cases, a leader in the business arena and a leader within the church, if they are able to manage emotions of people, understand the emotions of people, that would maybe differentiate them from the others. I found myself that early on in my career, when I was less experienced, maybe uh, people's emotions, I couldn't understand these things, you know. Um, but I had to learn. If you want to be successful, you're going to have to learn to understand that sometimes the lack of performance from somebody in the workplace or in the
Mhm,
church space is down to something that might have happened at home, and they're dealing with emotions that they brought to the office or to church.
mhm.
And so, yeah, you know, it calls for patience. Understanding emotions calls for patience, and patient leading is a difficult thing. It is a difficult thing.
So I think that may be an absolute valuable nugget. So we may have already hit our first golden nugget for tonight. Leaders working with their teams need to understand emotion, but teams need to understand that your leaders love you even when they're being difficult with you. So love is not necessarily just the soft thing. I'm going to make you all comfortable where you're at. I think what Myron alluded to as well was about love. It strives for excellence, you know, and in striving for excellence, it's going to bring out that excellence, which means that it's going to want to develop you. It's going to want to bring out the best in you. So if a leader truly loves you, a leader is not going to leave you in your comfort zone. And even if that means challenging something that you have delivered on and coming back and saying, how can we do better, which was a golden nugget that we reached the other week, then that is love. That is and of course, we're talking about it being done in the right kind of attitude, right? The right kind of attitude, approaching you and just looking for how it could be done better, is love that's trying to develop you so that you can become all that you were created to be. I want to quickly read a comment from Angelique, which I find very interesting. It says, I think it all boils down to the maturity of the leader in church. Because for me, the church should set the standard for the workplace. That is a very interesting comment. I figure it has a lot of truth in it. Um, a little bit easier when you're reading it than when you have to practice it. Again, and I think largely because of the emotion that comes with everything, especially in a volunteer kind of space. You know, people have to understand that if we approach them or challenge them on something, it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't like them. So I was talking, Myron, about being a leader with the right kind of attitude. So you're going to show love, but you've got to show that love with the right kind of attitude as well. I am wondering, how would a leader be confident in their leadership without becoming arrogant? And I think in a corporate space, we refer to it as arrogance. That's the first thing we see. I think in a church environment, the first thing we want to point out is that it's pride. So how does a leader be confident? Because everybody expects a leader, whether you're in the workspace or you're in a church or whatever volunteer organization, whether it's a 24-hour project or whatever the case is, we expect the leader to be clear. We expect the leader to be confident. But how does the leader be confident without being arrogant or being viewed as prideful and still winning his team over and leading his team?
Look, I've had the privilege of working alongside many people in many circles, church, outside the church. And the one thing that I noticed, uh, confidence is very closely associated with competence, right? I have found that those that I find attractive, and you'll find that naturally you are attracted to certain leaders. And a lot of times we think that it is their confidence that attracts us to them. But I think it's more the competence of the individual. Now, you cannot have confidence if you are incompetent. You have to be competent in what you do, right? And especially within the South African setting, I think that that is a word that we need to all gravitate towards: competent leadership, right?
Okay.
You know, you can give the uh, the false impression of confidence, and that's what is arrogant, in my view, in any case, or that leads to arrogance because of the lack of competence. Now, competence is the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. That's what competence is. And that's not something that I am defining. It's defined in the dictionary, and you can go and have a look at that, right? So that's competent. And you'll find that if you are a leader, and if we are talking to leaders now, uh, you will find that if you are competent in what you're doing, people will naturally have confidence in what you're doing. Now, I found that you have a leader that is confident, but the people are not confident in his leadership or her leadership, right? And that's arrogance, in my view. It's better to have a people that are confident in what you are doing as a leader. And in
Mm.
order for a people to be confident in you, it's down to you being competent, right?
Okay.
If you are competent in what you're doing, people will be confident in what you're doing. And competence is proven, right? Confidence is an impression, right? But competence is proven, okay? And a lot of people are giving the impressions of confidence, right? Which is leading towards arrogance. But when you can prove competence, naturally people will be confident in what you're doing. So even if you look at a South African setting, and you can look at many leaders within South Africa,
Hmm.
and over the, the history of our country, and you can pinpoint who the competent leaders were and are, and who the incompetent leaders are. And you will find that all of them look confident, right? But not all of them have the confidence of the people.
Mm.
And that's
Okay.
down to competence. And people watch competence. So any leader that's wanting to keep the confidence of their people, instead of you being confident, it is better to have the confidence of people. Make sure that you are competent in what you're doing. Now, competence is um, it changes. It depends on what you're dealing with. I have found that, especially in my dealings with people, and even if you look at some of our recent stuff that's been happening to us as a people here in South Africa, you will find that one leader in one instance can command the confidence of a people, but in another instance cannot. The same leader. And again, it goes down to being competent in one area of leadership, but being incompetent in another area of leadership. Now, when you start to see that you are incompetent in an area of leadership, you can go and change that. You can go and study. You can inquire of other leaders. There's nothing wrong with being mentored by other people in order
Hmm.
for somebody else to maybe help you with the areas that you're lacking in. And you can change that. Time can change that.
Hmm.
But the challenge is arrogant people think that they can just carry on doing what they've always done. And they don't care about changing it. They don't care about making sure they're competent in all areas of leadership, right?
So then a leader should focus more on being competent and improving his competence rather than trying to show off a confidence. Because if you improve your competence, your people are going to be confident in you. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that the most confident leader is a leader whose team is confident in him.
Exactly. That's it.
Okay.
You know, you know, how do you know who's arrogant and who's actually confident? Well, the one that's confident in what they're doing, but the people don't have any confidence in them. That's just arrogant, you know. But you have other people who are humble about what they're doing, but there's a confidence in the people.
Mm.
And that's more important. It's not important for you to be confident as it is for a people to be confident in you. So as leaders, you are leading, whether you're leading two people or 20,000 people, doesn't matter, right? It's all down to your competence. And competence can be improved. You can study, you can do all types of things to improve competence.
Hmm.
And those are important things. Those are important things. You can give somebody a title, and we've done that in our country. You know that.
Yeah.
We've done this in our country. We've given people titles, right? But they are incompetent. So you can call them anything you want. And they can have the confidence which equals an arrogance, or they can have the confidence of a people because they are confident.
Fantastic. There's a lot of people just agreeing with you, giving us a thumbs up, setting some hearts. I'm guessing the hearts mean they love what you're saying, and we'll leave it at that for tonight. But I think that was fantastic, just insight there. I was even going to ask about, then does a leader just focus on their strengths because it's about them being competent? But I think you've even answered that question. When it comes to our strength, focus on it, build it, become more competent at that. When it comes to our weaknesses, I guess it's the same answer. Begin to develop and build up that competence. Now, here's dealing with our subject on leaders and their teams. Can a leader strengthen himself for the areas of his weakness? Can he strengthen himself by selecting team members who may be stronger than him in an area where he's not as strong or she is not as strong? Is that threatening to the leader? Is that an unwise move? Or is that something that we should actually consider doing? Strengthen ourselves with those who are stronger in those areas than we are.
Definitely, that's what it's all about. A great leader knows where he's weak, and he'll pull in people in his team that are strong in those areas, and leverage. And one of the things that I've noticed, right, about many leaders is most leaders are very scared to talk about where they're weak, right? They feel like that exposes them and shows that they're weak overall. But I found that people are attracted to leaders that are able to say, "I'm weak in this area. I need you to help me," and give the credit where it's due. A good leader will always say, "So and so assisted me with this deliverable." If you're working in a corporate environment or wherever it is, so and so's assisted me, and there's nothing wrong with it. Especially as Christians, we need to make sure that credit is given where it's due, right? And I think if I go back to the comment from earlier, I agree. The church needs to definitely set the benchmark for leadership in all circles of life, in all aspects of life. And one of the things we need to do is make sure that when we are leveraging, we're not leveraging without giving credit. That's important. It's vital. It's vital to the team and the functioning of the team, the soundness of the team, and it's vital to you as a leader to show that I know where I'm weak, but I'm
And I
able to
think
pull in something stronger.
if team members see that they're in an environment where they can get the credit, then they will be willing to add value. They will be willing to share their thoughts, their ideas, bring their excellence to the team as well. Because if they're just simply going to be hijacked, if they're going to be sidelined and not given the credit, then obviously they're going to look for a space where they themselves can grow. I think many years ago I heard the saying where people will go where they are celebrated. So if we have valuable team members and we're not giving them the credit, then I guess we will literally be chasing them away.
Definitely, definitely, and
I
and
want to
and
pick up
that's what builds
on some. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that in itself will build confidence from your team. Your team will have confidence in you, knowing that they're going to definitely get somewhere, right?
Mm,
Because people are recognizing that they are delivering on certain things. It's weak leadership that doesn't show that they have a strong team. A weak
mm.
leader will be scared to show that his team is strong, and that's
Very,
something
very
that we need to
profound
think about.
statement right there. I'm going to take a moment to pause and just take that one in. That's everybody that's online, just like just take a moment to pause, take that one in. You should that should be your meditation for the next couple of weeks if you're a leader. You can just take that one in. I think that was pretty profound right there, and I think that's actually one of those character traits of love. And that's one of the ways that love would display itself, whether in a workspace or within a church space. When we're willing to make room for others, when we're willing to celebrate others, that's one of those elements of love. And I think it's actually a brilliant example of how a corporate leader can lead from a place of love without having to talk about the subject or make it feel too soft in the room. It's love that will do that, that will celebrate somebody else and allow somebody else to rise into their spaces of recognition as well. I want to ask you about, because you mentioned being Christian, and Christians should set the standard. So if we're talking about a leader within a team space, how does a person deal with other individuals in the team who differ in values or belief? And the last thing that we want to be doing, whether it's a religious belief system or just whatever our value system is we don't want to be, in a sense, betraying ourselves. We don't want to be compromising what we believe in. But how do you work within a team environment? How do you ensure that you're not putting at risk your own promotion, if you will, or your own growth, when you have individuals on your team that don't share the same kind of values and beliefs? You can maybe work together, but you don't share the same values and belief.
Yeah, look, that's always a difficult one, and I found that this is something that trips up most leaders, most people, whichever setting it is in. You're always going to have people with different values and different beliefs. Now, yes, they flow into each other. Um, More often than not, your belief system will dictate to what your value system is, right? And a lot of times, this is what trips people up. So, what I advise all of our leaders to do, and any leader that I speak to about, is to be faithful to the God that has called us, and that is Jesus Christ. If you develop your relationship with Jesus, you will find that even in those situations, you will know when to just be silent on issues that you don't need to
Mm,
interfere in, right? Uh, and what you need to speak about. The thing about a relationship with Christ is Christ was more relevant or most relevant outside of the temple, outside of the church.
mhm,
That's where he spent most of his time. And the time that he spent in the church, well, you can go study the scriptures and you'll find that those were some hectic things that he did inside of the church.
mhm,
The famous one is where he went in and capsized tables.
mm,
But in the marketplace, you will find that he was silent with certain issues. When the woman at the well, or rather the woman that was caught in the act of adultery,
mm,
and people were getting ready to stone her, he didn't capsize any tables. He said to them, "He who is out without sin, cast the first stone." And I think if Christians can get this, right, when you're in the corporate setting, especially when it comes down to values and beliefs and all of these things, he who is without sin, cast the first stone. And that's when you learn how to keep quiet. This is what I learned, especially when you got some challenging things happening in the office. He who is without sin cast the first stone. That does not mean that we allow things to continue. That does not mean that we become a part of the problem, but we definitely don't want to stone anybody. I found that a lot of Christians get criticized in the workplace because we pick up stones,
mm,
right? Don't pick up stones. Chill. Take it easy. You know, you don't have to have all of the answers in the workplace. You don't have to have all of the answers about beliefs and values, right? What you need to do is in the workplace, ensure that you are competent. I got a
mm,
lot of people in the workplace. They
mhm,
know how to talk about faith in the workplace, and I hope that uh, the God would open up the ears of the listeners that I'm speaking to tonight. We know how to talk about faith in the workplace. So we got a whole lot of people talking faith the whole day, but are
mhm,
incompetent in what they're doing. Understand that in the workplace, it's down to your competence. Okay, it's not down to your faith in the workplace. It's down
mhm,
to your competence in the workplace. Uh, Let the values of the people remain their values. If God decides to change them, God be praised for that, and they will come and talk to you about it. But one of the things that I found most annoying, I must be honest, was some people that found that the pulpit was their office environment, and they always wanted to preach sermons in the office. but they were incompetent. Children of a living God, prove that you are competent. When you talk about a man like Joseph, he was competent
Mhm.
as a leader in Egypt. He didn't talk about faith there. He didn't go talk to them about values and beliefs. He was competent. And that is what elevated him in Egypt.
Mm.
It was not faith, it was not beliefs, it was not values, it was competence. Now, a competence that had God behind it, no doubt about that.
Oh,
I'm not
yes.
disputing it. But
Yeah.
go and have a look at when Joseph talks to Pharaoh. You won't see Joseph talking to Pharaoh about belief systems, nothing. He said to Pharaoh, "This is what your dream means." He said to Pharaoh, "This is what you do." And he proved to Pharaoh that he was competent to lead a nation that was not his. All
Mm.
right? He was competent to lead a nation that was not his. So
Wow.
never forget, he never changed their belief systems. He never interfered with that.
Hmm.
He led them competently.
And your
7 years of
competence is going to
famine.
become the example of who you serve, and your
This
competence
is
is
it.
what going to let you rise up as a leader in your area of influence, right?
This is it. And that leads me into something that if you look at where we are now, uh, even economically, if you look at all of these things that have happened, right? And then you
Hmm.
go back and have a look at Joseph. Joseph, it was down to competence that he was able to get the nation of Egypt to a place where in 7 years of famine, they were able to trade and become more successful than they'd
Hmm.
ever been before. That was down to competence. Children of a living God, hear me out. It's down to competence.
Mm.
That was not an act of faith. That was down to him being competent.
Mm.
He knew that he needed to stockpile. He knew that he needed to build silos. He knew what he needed to get done in order to ensure that when the 7 years of famine hit, he could trade. He could take Egypt to another level. If you're looking to get to another level during this time and during this crisis, it's going
Mm.
to be competence. All right?
Wow.
Competence.
I feel like I'm sitting down with a great teacher tonight. Let me publicly declare I will be stealing some of these notes that I'm just getting all of this information tonight. So yeah, here's the credits. Right now, I'm laying it down that if ever I speak on any of these things, you know where it came from. But I've given the credit tonight, and that's my disclaimer on it. So talking about these times, what is it about these times? What is required in leadership at these times? What is required in a leader and teams? Um, how do we work with teams right now to get us through these times? And what does that mean for you when we talk about these times? What does that mean for you, and what do leaders need to be doing?
Okay. So in order for you to be a leader, you need to
Hmm.
turn around and have a look if people are following you, right? And and,
Okay.
and that's a simple thing, and I'm sure you've heard it said before. A lot of people call themselves leaders, but is anybody following? All right.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing. If nobody's following you, that means that you've lost the confidence of a people, and
Hmm.
and that's a difficult thing, but it happens. It happens, and there are various reasons. When you lose the confidence of a people, it's time for you to explore your competencies, right? Explore
Hmm.
where you failed, right, and start learning. Because faith will do things in your life, and there's no doubt about that, right? But when you study scripture and you see during a time of famine and during times that we're facing right now, it was competent people that God would look for. God even
Hmm.
sought out a man like Moses in the wilderness because he knew, even though he stuttered, even though he had weaknesses and failures, he was going to be a competent leader.
Hmm.
And he called him out of that place to come back and lead a people. It's competency, right? You're going to have to. Some of us, maybe we need to spend time studying. Maybe during this time we need to register on some part-time studies to to a place where we can learn on how we change things. You know, the thing about Joseph was he had a lot of training in his father's house, right? And of that, there can be no doubt. When he
Mhm.
was still in his father's house, he was trained. When he got to Potiphar's house, he got trained. Even in prison, he got trained and he
Mhm.
elevated. You can't just elevate because your prayer life is in check and all of these things. Now, yes, you need to keep all of those things in check, but I find that a lot of Christians only focus on the spiritual side of things, but
Mhm.
they of no earthly good. So they have all the heavenly concepts in check, but on earth they are of no earthly good. And you need to be of some earthly good right now in order
Mhm.
for us to step forward as leaders, right? So competent. If you're looking at starting something up, so let's say you want to go, for those of us that might have been retrenched, as an example.
Mhm.
Yes, you can have a look at what's in your hands, and yes, you can start working on some things. But some of us, in fact, most of us, need to maybe get some training done. Take some time, register into an institution, get some studies done
Mhm.
on go and learn from some experts on how to change things, you know, and go back in and change it. Some of us might be able to study part time while working. Do it. You'll see that you'll get yourself equipped to be the leader you want to be. Now, all of us want to be leaders. I'm yet to meet somebody that says, I don't want to be a leader. That person, I've not met them yet. Everybody wants to lead,
Mhm.
but you can't lead if you're not competent. And child of God, you more than anybody else, make sure you're competent. The
Hmm.
world's watching us. The world's watching us, and we need to arise as a competent church, a church that can lead.
And a lot of spaces have education even for free these days, something that may not have been the case previously, but certainly in this season.
There you go.
I'm going to ask you, we've spoken a lot about the differences between corporate and church and leading within the corporate and the church sector. And let me just remind anybody that's connected tonight that has any questions to drop us that you do so, because we only have a few minutes left to in conversation tonight. But going back to just this difference in the corporate and the church world, is everything different? Or are there some similarities in terms of leading teams in the church or leading teams in the corporate? What would the similarities be? What is a leader? What should a leader expect? So whether you're leading in the corporate or you're leading in a church environment, there are certain traits that the leaders should have in common, right? Because there are certain things that are similar in both environments.
Yeah, yeah. Look, this is something that I think it's something that we could sit and talk about for many hours, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, I found that many churches lean more on corporate stuff these days. They,
Mm-hmm.
they they bring a lot of the corporate stuff into church, and I want to go back to uh, the comment the lady made earlier that the
Mm-hmm.
church needs to lead the way.
Yeah.
Having been in both areas, I'm a second generation pastor myself, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a pastor's home. I've watched how church operates my whole life, right? I was born in a pastor's home. My father was already a pastor before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So I have known church my whole life. And when I stepped into the corporate environment, one thing I knew was that I had everything I needed already to lead because of my skill set that I had received in the house of my father and my mother, right?
Oh, that's interesting,
Uh,
right?
and I didn't look to I looked for opportunities to take the gospel in passively. I looked for opportunities to bring in things I'd learned in church passively. So I wouldn't quote scripture, but I knew that
Yeah.
a lot of the things I was leading with came out of scripture. Uh, a lot of the things that I would talk about, even when I'm doing my team briefings, came out of scripture, but I wouldn't reference it as scripture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I found that differentiated me in the marketplace, all right? It got me to places that I shouldn't have gotten to be honest. right? It put me ahead on many things. So I found when I got back to church that a lot of people were trying to bring the secular world into church. And there's where the problem lies, right? Because if we're trying to run a blue chip church, like you run a blue chip company, we're going to have problems, child of God. Because the last time I looked, it's all about souls and not numbers of people or finances or any of that. It's about souls. The Bible says, "He who wins souls is wise." That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I found that most of the time I had to remind myself and I had to remind a lot of people that whilst that works outside, in the kingdom of God, that might not work. And so there are things you can bring in, and you know what I found? Most of the things that you bring in actually are birthed out of the church in the first place. If you
Mm,
go to the circular world, you'll see that they put their vision statements up on the wall,
mm,
right? And most of the most successful businesses you'll encounter have their visions up on the wall. That comes out
mm-hmm.
of the Bible. That's what
Yeah,
the Bible teaches. In the book of Habakkuk, it says, make the vision clear, put it up on the
yeah.
wall, so that he
Mm-hmm.
who sees it may run. There's acceleration that comes because he sees it. And, and,
Yeah.
and, and so people think that those things come out of the marketplace. No, 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 no. Those things are all out of church, right?
Mm,
Now, we must remember that. We must recognize that. And we must be faithful to what God has called us to be. God's called us to be a church.
mm-hmm.
If you're running a church, remember that. You're not a blue chip company. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about how big you get even on the earth. As much as we all want to be successful, and that's all good, you know. We want to grow, yes, there's no doubt about it. But heaven's going to calculate what you've done on earth differently. And
Absolutely.
we must be mindful of that, especially as leaders when we're sitting and we're talking strategies, when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about how we did in church. I mean, you know, we have these review meetings these days. How was service today? Or how did church go? What can we change to make it better, make it more attractive? You know, I'm reminded of John the Baptist standing in the wilderness calling people a generation of vipers. And I wonder, what would have been the critique session with his board members that day? I don't know. I really don't know. But what I do know is John the Baptist prepared the way for the coming of Jesus Christ, the first coming. I believe that the second coming of Christ is more closer than it's ever been before.
Mm,
And so it's not blue chip strategies
mm-hmm.
that need to be sown into the kingdom in order for us to prepare the way, but it's just Holy Ghost filled preaching, teaching, and even leading in the church more now than
Absolutely.
ever.
And I think, I mean, picking up on John the Baptist, he prepared the way, right? He prepared the way for a leader who was greater than himself, essentially. And I think therein, and on the statement that you made earlier, growing up in your dad's home, that was in the pastor's home, is what actually equipped you for your leadership in the corporate space when you entered in. And I think we shouldn't downplay that as much as we were saying earlier that, you know, we talk a lot more about love, perhaps in the church environment than we do in a work environment. But it's that love that we talk about in the church environment that makes the leader able to understand that love that he can apply to his teams in the work environment. So there's plenty that is coming from the pulpit. And like you said, uh, no need to compromise the message of the word, because the message of the word is what builds leaders and raises leaders who can build strong teams that can cause them to rise up, you know, obviously, like you said, based on the competence of that team, competence of the leader, competence of the team, and bring them to a great place. And I suppose a very straightforward example of that is Jesus Christ himself. Jesus Christ was not a by the book kind of leader in his day. He was, for lack of a better word, I suppose, a bit of a revolutionary. And he selected a group of people who were not the kind of people that, you know, the suit and tie character would have selected himself. These were rough and tough characters. Jesus went ahead to select them, uh, pulled just all of the ability and the potential out of them. And so here we have it. We have a leader who doesn't play by the book, who selects a group of people nobody else would select. 2,000 years later, he's not here, but his organization has gone global, and that's, he didn't compromise anything in his leadership. So, in a roundabout way, going back to, what are the similarities? And I think it's to answer the question in a way that doesn't answer it but changes it. We shouldn't really be looking at the similarities. We should recognize the higher authority and power that is within the church world that can equip leaders to lead in whatever other environment they find themselves in. So it's not about trying to find the similarity. For me, it boils down to tonight understanding the greater value that investment of the word can have in your leadership abilities. And I guess that's like what Myron said, came down from his father being a pastor, equipping him to be in that workspace. So the pulpit is not a place to take lightly when the right kind and the word is rightly divided and shared with those who are sitting in our pews that are the leaders. Before we go tonight, Myron, I want to ask you, can you share some tips with leaders tonight on how to select the right people for their teams? How would leaders go about selecting the right people in their teams?
Well, again, let's just quickly on that one go back to scripture. I think that's the best place for me to find it. And the greatest
Okay.
leader that you closed with just now was Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jesus Christ still,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at Jesus's team, it was filled with many people. You had 12 that were very close to him, and then you had, of that 12, 3 that were closest to him.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus knew full well where Judas was and who Judas was, but he still chose him. And many times, you and I as leaders, we're looking for what we call this synergy. We're looking for people that are going to click with us. That's what we look for.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus teaches me that you don't necessarily need those people, right? You need a team that is going to get you across the line, whatever your line is, whatever your goal is in life. You go back to what the end game is now. For Christ, the end game was Calvary. The end
Mm-hmm.
game was the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It wasn't Matthew that got him to the cross. It wasn't the 3 that he took into his inner circle that got him to the cross.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Judas that got him to the cross. That is significant. Most leaders don't know where they want to go. Therefore, their team selection is down to people I like, people I want to be around. I want you to understand where you want to go. You need to know where you're going first, and then you choose a team that's going to get you there. And within that team that's going to get you there, there might be those characters that are like Judas. They are necessary to getting you to where you need to go. Bear
Mm-hmm.
that in mind. Don't kick people out because they don't agree with you. Don't kick people out because, hey, and more so in church circles, churches today, most leaders want to surround themselves with yes men.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need that. You need people that are going to get you to the prize, whatever that prize is. And Paul talks about pushing forward, reaching for that prize, right? Most of us as leaders, we forget what the goal is, and we don't know how to select our team because we don't even know what our goal is. So as a leader, before you select your team,
Mm-hmm.
understand what your goal is. And your goal will allow you to select your team. Christ knew his goal was the cross. In order for him to get to the cross, Judas was more vital for him to get to the cross than any of the other ones he chose.
I wish more leaders would catch on to the concept of spending more time with your high value, efficient leaders than trying to wrap the diaper around the other ones. I'm going to say that quickly and stop there. And let me rather read Shireen's comment. It sounds much better than what I had to say. It says, your team is as strong as its weakest link. And then I have a question for you from Emmanuel Stanton Pillay. You and I both know him. And his question tonight is, how do you approach conflict and opposition in a secular world as a leader? How do you approach it? We spoke about this at the beginning, but we didn't talk about how you approach it in a secular world as a leader.
Okay, so conflict and opposition very closely associated, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think our understanding needs to be clear that any opposition has the potential to push you to the next dimension. Any opposition. So if you look at it just from a negative pole type of situation, so you've got a magnet with a positive side and a negative side, and you push them, on the same thing, it's going to attract. But if you push two positives, they won't come together. They're going to push each other away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing about that is when you're faced with opposition, it has the ability to push you. And if you understand that, you'll approach it differently. If you see conflict and opposition as the opportunity for you as a leader to get to another dimension of leadership, you'll approach it differently. You won't look at it as an evil. You won't look at it as, not another conflict situation. Most leaders, they make their names in conflict. They make their names in opposition. They don't. It's not when things are smooth sailing that you're going to make your name. And so I think as leaders, most of us, or the real, let me say the real leaders, are attracted to those type of situations. They find it attractive because they know that this has the huge potential to define them, right? The other thing is now, as Christians, you're going to have to step in there with the spirit of a living God inside of you, right? And as much as you can prepare yourself for a meeting, right? You have to be competent, yes. But when it comes to conflict and conflict resolution, I have found that the spirit of a living God intervening through a child of God in that situation is the most powerful answer. And so allow yourself to be moved by the spirit while you are sitting in these situations and while you're sitting in these circumstances. Push out all of the preconceived ideas about people, because a lot of times as a leader, when you step into a conflict situation, brother so and so or sister so and so in church, or when it comes to the workplace, there are certain people that carry a certain name. And we all know this, So when you sit in management meetings, a manager will say, you don't have this guy in your team. If you had him in your team wouldn't be performing, or that type of thing. Kick out all of those preconceived ideas. Step into it, understand the problem, and bring the wisdom of God. Be like Solomon. Bring the wisdom of God into it. Conflict, a child of God is made to deal with that. And it's what will define us. So preparing for it, I would say, make sure you understand that this has the huge potential to push you to the next level.
Mm-hmm. So final question that came in at the last minute, but it's from Darren. And the question is, how do we switch off our leadership mindset that we use in church leadership in the workplace? I would say to Darren, we don't switch it off. I think what we said earlier was that it's actually the uncompromised word that helps you to develop your leadership and to grow your leadership, so that you can take that level of leadership that's been elevated in the church world and bring that into your corporate sector. There's a whole lot more that you can learn from your church leadership, that it's just a matter of knowing and understanding how to cross it over. I think one of the examples that Myron mentioned earlier is using scriptural text in a meeting, but not necessarily quoting, the reference as you would in a church environment. And that in itself helped to just bring some promotion his way. I am have had to rush that one and bring it to a quick close there because we have hit our time. But I want to say thank you so much to all of the likes, the hearts, the shares, the questions, and the people who have connected with us tonight. It has been fantastic talking to you, Myron, as always. Very valuable, full of rich insights tonight. I'm going to just go in and summarize about 5 points that came in from our conversation tonight. The first thing that we spoke about was leaders having to understand emotions in their team. So leaders who work with their team need to understand the emotions within the team and the emotions that individuals in the team have so that you can lead and direct your team well. The second great golden nugget for tonight was that competence drives confidence. So if you want confidence as a leader, it's not about you trying to pump yourself up. Your team should be confident in you, and the only way you're going to achieve that is by being competent in the first place. And I think you don't have enough of fingers or toes to count the number of times that competence was mentioned tonight. So that was the second thing. Competence drives confidence. The third point that I picked up from tonight was that a weak leader will not celebrate the strength of his team. That's something that we need to take a few days to digest and to meditate on. Point number 4, know where you want to go. Select people who will get you where you want to go. In terms of selecting a team, don't just select those that make you comfortable or that look nice or that make you feel nice, but know where you want to go as a leader. Select people who will get you where you want to go. Not people who will make you feel nice, but get you there. High value, efficient leaders have the energy that don't always have to be cranked. They'll take you there. That's just me throwing in my 2 cents there. The last point, opposition has the potential to push you to the next level. So real leaders will run to or in the direction of opposition because it has the potential to push you to the next level. Myron, that's just 5 of the points that I got from tonight. 30 seconds. Any final words you want to share tonight with all of those that are online with us before we say our good night?
No, I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity. And if anything was unclear, they can always pop some questions through to you, and we can look at how we can answer that. But thank you so much. I much appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for all the responses that we're getting online as well. Thank you, Myron, for your time tonight. Thank you for your valuable insights. Thank you for being extremely well behaved in the session, but I absolutely enjoyed the discussion with you. Good night to everybody. We pray the Lord's richest blessings upon you. If you have a prayer request, you'll find the link connected to the broadcast. Just click on that. You can send us a prayer request. You want to know more about the Lord Jesus Christ, how you can increase and improve in your leadership journey, just knowing more about Jesus, then just drop us a note either in the comment, send us a private message, use a link that is in the broadcast and Facebook as well to connect with us. We want to pray God's blessing over you, over your family, especially over your leadership tonight. And I pray more than anything else that we are going to get competent leaders leading us through this season to the next level, because conflict and challenges come our way, but it will push us into our next level. Have a fantastic evening, people. Thank you for connecting.